kettle had been singing for too long. It wasn't a loud sound, not the kind that made you jump. It was patient. Persistent. A thin, steady note that threaded itself through the kitchen and refused to be ignored. Vivien let it go on anyway, watching the steam fog the window above the sink, until the backyard blurred into a watercolor of winter grass and bare branches. In the other room, Tom laughed at something on his phone. The laugh was bright and empty, like a coin tossed into a cup. He didn't look up when Trisha walked past him with her own phone in hand, screen dark, thumb hovering over nothing. Vivien turned off the burner only when the sound began to feel like it was inside her skull. She set 2 mugs on the counter. One chipped at the rim, the one her mother insisted on keeping because it had character. The other plain and heavy, the kind that held heat a long time. She poured slowly, the black tea turning the water amber, then almost mahogany, and watched the color deepen as if it were thinking. Trisha drifted into the kitchen without making it an announcement. She moved like someone trained to avoid taking up space. The doorframe caught her for a moment, her shoulder brushing the wood. Then she was inside, leaning one hip against the counter as if she needed the support. Her hair was still damp from the shower, pale strands clinging to the soft line of her neck. A hoodie hung off one shoulder. There was a quiet carelessness to her, the kind that wasn't careless at all, but exhausted. Vivien slid the heavy mug toward her. Trisha's fingers closed around it. Not the handle. The ceramic itself, palms taking the heat as if she wanted to feel something undeniable. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was gentle. Always gentle. A person could mistake gentleness for ease. Vivien didn't. In the living room, Tom was still laughing. Still not moving. The sound of a video played tinny through his phone speakers. Someone lifting weights. Someone shouting encouragement. The thud of metal. A triumphant grunt. Trisha's eyes flicked toward the sound, then away. A reflex. A small flinch no one would call a flinch. Vivien watched her swallow. Watched her take the first sip too quickly, wince at the heat, then pretend she hadn't. "You don't have to punish yourself," Vivien said, not unkindly. Trisha blinked, startled as if Vivien had spoken in a language she'd forgotten she understood. "I'm not," Trisha said, but there was no conviction. Just habit. Vivien leaned back against the opposite counter, crossing her ankles, hands loose at her sides. She didn't pick up her own mug yet. She let Trisha be the only one holding warmth. Outside, rain began again, soft at first, barely a suggestion, a darkening of the glass. It made the kitchen feel closer, smaller. Like a secret. Trisha's eyes went to the window. The rain traced thin paths down the pane, each one bending around the others as if avoiding contact. "They said it would clear up," Trisha murmured. "People say a lot of things," Vivien replied. A pause settled between them. Not awkward. Not comfortable. Something else, something suspended. From the hallway, Tom's footsteps finally approached. He appeared in the doorway with his sweatshirt half-zipped, gym bag slung over one shoulder. His hair was still dry. He'd spent more time in front of the mirror than in the shower. "Babe," he said to Trisha without looking at her, then to Vivien. "Sis." Vivien gave him a brief glance. The glance did not invite anything. Tom's gaze did what it always did. Skim. The room, the faces, the moment. Nothing to hold him. Nothing to slow him down. "You still coming later?" Trisha asked quiet. Tom paused, as if surprised by the existence of a question. "Later for what?" he said, already shifting his weight toward the door, toward leaving. Toward the only place he seemed capable of longing. Trisha's fingers tightened around the mug. Heat. Pressure. Stillness. "The dinner," she said. "Your parents' friends, you said. Oh." Tom's mouth twisted, almost amused. "Yeah, that. I'll be back." He said it the way you said you'd remember to water a plant. Trisha nodded. A tiny nod. The kind of nod that kept the peace. Vivien felt a small, sharp irritation in her chest. Not for Trisha. Not even entirely for Tom. For the ease with which reality bent around him. Tom moved in, kissed Trisha on the cheek, quick, absent like a stamp, then tossed, "Save me some," toward no one in particular, and disappeared out the back door. The rain met him immediately. The sound of it intensified as the door swung shut. Water against wood. Water against roof. The world insisting on itself. Trisha didn't move for a moment. She held her mug with both hands and stared at the place where Tom had been, as if something might still be there if she stared hard enough. Vivien lifted her own mug now. took one sip. The tea was bitter. It tasted honest. "It's just how he is," Trisha said softly, not looking at Vivien. A sentence that had been said so many times it had lost its shape. Vivien let her gaze settle on Trisha's profile. The curve of her mouth. The slight tension at her jaw. "And how is that?" Vivien asked. Trisha gave a small laugh, too quiet to count as laughter. "You know, Tom." That was not an answer. It was an excuse disguised as a name. Vivien waited. She didn't fill the space. She let it press gently until Trisha had to feel it. When Trisha finally looked up, her eyes met Vivien's and then faltered, as if the contact itself was too direct. Vivien didn't look away. The moment stretched. The rain kept coming. The house kept breathing. Trisha's cheeks flushed, and Vivien saw it, saw the faint, involuntary reaction, the body's betrayal of what the mind hadn't decided yet. Vivien's mouth curved, barely. Not a smile. A recognition. "It's strange," Trisha said, voice lowered as if ashamed to admit something that wasn't a crime. "Talking to you." Vivien's fingers traced the rim of her mug, once slowly. A small motion that made the ceramic sing against her skin. "Strange how?" Vivien asked. Trisha's gaze dropped to Vivien's hand. She looked away again, almost immediately. "I don't know." Trisha swallowed. Like you're listening. Like you actually." She stopped. Restarted softer. "Like you hear what I'm saying before I say it." Vivien's throat tightened. Not with guilt. Not with pride. With something more intimate, the sensation of being named. "Is that what you want?" Vivien asked. The question slipped out before Vivien could decide whether she meant it as comfort or as a blade. Trisha inhaled slow. Her shoulders rose beneath the hoodie, then fell again. "I don't know what I want," Trisha admitted. Not like that." Vivien turned slightly, just enough to face her more fully. She kept her posture easy. She kept her voice calm. "Not like what?" Vivien asked. Trisha stared at the tea, at the dark surface, reflecting nothing. Her lips parted, then closed. She was deciding whether to protect herself from her own truth. A silence expanded. Not empty. Dense. Thick with the sound of rain and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Vivien didn't interrupt it. She let it become a room they had to sit inside together. Trisha's thumb began to rub along the seam of her phone case where the plastic met the leather. Back and forth. Back and forth. Small, repetitive motion like prayer. Vivien watched it. Watched the way Trisha's body kept searching for something to hold. "It's stupid," Trisha said finally, eyes still down. "Most honest things sound stupid when you say them aloud," Vivien replied. That drew Trisha's gaze up again. A flicker of surprise. Then something else. Something like relief. Vivien's chest warmed, almost imperceptibly, as if the air had shifted. Trisha took another sip of tea, slower this time, letting the warmth move through her. "You read so much," Trisha said, as if she were confessing envy. "It's like you have all these worlds in your head." Vivien's eyes narrowed slightly. Not in suspicion. In attention. "And you don't?" Vivien asked. Trisha gave that small, quiet laugh again. "I don't know. Maybe I used to." Vivien tilted her head. "What happened?" Trisha's mouth tightened. Her gaze slipped toward the doorway as if Tom might still be there. As if the truth had to be careful. "Life," she said. "Or..." She shook her head. "Or maybe I just got tired." Vivien let the word sit. Tired. A word that could mean everything. She stepped closer. Not quickly, not as if she were approaching prey, but as if she were narrowing the distance between two people in the same weather. She stopped beside Trisha, close enough that their sleeves almost touched. Trisha didn't move away. Her breath changed instead. Shorter, higher, then steadier, as if she were trying to control what her body was doing without permission. Vivien reached for the sugar jar on the counter, unscrewed it, then set it back without using it. The action served no purpose except to give her hands something to do. To keep them from doing what they wanted. "Tell me something," Vivien said. Trisha's eyes lifted. "What?" "Something you like," Vivien replied. "Something that isn't about Tom. Or the gym. Or his friends. Something that belongs to you." The words were quiet, but they struck with weight. Trisha blinked, caught off guard by being asked to exist alone. She stared at the rain-streaked window again, as if the answer might be outside. She started, then stopped. Restarted, softer. I like when people take their time. Vivien's breath caught. A small hit she didn't intend. Trisha's cheeks flushed again, deeper now, as if she realized what she had said after she said it. Vivien didn't tease her. She didn't rescue her. She held the moment steady. Time with what? Vivien asked. Trisha's eyes slid to Vivien's mouth, then away. With anything, Trisha whispered. With words. With. She swallowed. With attention. Vivien's fingers curled around her mug. The ceramic was warm against her palm, grounding her, keeping her anchored. A thought moved through her, quiet, insistent. It's only words. It was the kind of thought that sounded like restraint. Like safety. Like a boundary. And yet it didn't calm her. It didn't settle anything. It only made the air in the kitchen feel charged, as if language itself had become touch. Trisha shifted her weight on the counter. The hoodie slipped farther down her shoulder. Skin appeared, pale, warm, real. Vivien's gaze lingered there a fraction too long. Trisha noticed. Her breath shortened again. The rain tapped harder against the window, a steady percussion. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked as the house adjusted in the cold. Vivien, Trisha said, and the way she said the name made it feel like a question. Vivien's eyes lifted to hers. Green meeting hazel brown, but hazel brown wasn't right. Trisha's eyes were lighter than that. They held gold in them when the kitchen light hit. A strange kind of softness that could look like innocence if you didn't watch closely. Vivien watched closely. What? Vivien asked, voice low. Trisha hesitated. Then she spoke as if she were stepping onto thin ice. You make me feel. She stopped. Her throat worked. I don't know, like I'm awake. Vivien's pulse moved under her skin, quick and sharp, then steadied. She kept her expression composed. She kept her body still. But inside, something shifted. A tiny fracture. A line crossed without movement. It's only words, the thought returned. Only words. And yet Vivien felt with unsettling clarity that words were exactly where this would begin. Words. Presence. The slow act of being seen. The front door upstairs opened and closed with a dull thud. Wind pushed rain against the house. The world continued. Time kept moving. Nobody asked permission. Trisha took her mug to the sink and began washing it, though it didn't need washing yet. The gesture was too careful. Too controlled. A way to do something with her hands. Vivien joined her, picked up the other mug, and turned on the warm water. They stood shoulder to shoulder, washing dishes that weren't dirty, listening to the rain and the soft rush of water like a private tide. A mundane act. Domestic. Safe. And still, the air between them felt alive. Trisha's sleeve brushed Vivien's forearm. Barely. A whisper of contact. Trisha froze for a fraction of a second, then kept washing as if nothing happened. Vivien's skin remembered the brush. Held it. The body always remembered first. Vivien rinsed her mug slowly, watched the water slide down the ceramic, watched her own hands move with deliberate calm. She could feel Trisha beside her like warmth through fabric. When Vivien reached for the dish towel, Trisha reached for it at the same time. Their fingers met. Not accidental. Not entirely. Trisha's fingertips were cool, but her palm was warm. She didn't pull away immediately. Her hand stayed. Half second too long. A small, quiet mistake. Vivien felt it like a spark. Trisha's eyes lifted to Vivien's face. Wide, startled. As if she hadn't known her own body would betray her so openly. Vivien didn't speak. She didn't move. She simply held the contact and let Trisha decide what it meant. Trisha's breath came shallow. Then slower. Then she withdrew her hand and wrapped both arms around herself, as if suddenly cold. In the living room, the television turned itself on. Tom must have left it earlier, some automatic setting, filling the house with a low murmur of voices. Commercial. A cheerful jingle. A ridiculous intruder. Trisha flinched at the sound, then laughed under her breath like someone embarrassed to be interrupted. Vivien reached out and clicked the remote off without looking. The silence returned, immediate and complete, like the house had been waiting to exhale. Trisha stared at her. You didn't even hesitate, Trisha said. Vivien finally smiled, Small, controlled. I don't like noise when I'm thinking. And when you're not thinking? Trisha asked, then looked down as if she regretted it the second it left her mouth. Vivien's gaze softened. Not in kindness exactly. In intent. I'm always thinking, Vivien said. Trisha's throat moved. She nodded, as if she understood something that frightened her. Outside, the rain kept falling. The sky grew darker earlier than it should have. The kitchen light made Trisha's hair look almost white at the edges, a halo that didn't belong in this house. Vivien watched her, and the same thought returned, altered now. Less like restraint and more like a dare. It's only words. Only words, and already Trisha looked as if she were being touched. Vivien felt the fracture widen inside her, quiet and irreversible. Not desire announced. Desire infiltrating. And for the first time, Vivien didn't feel like she was observing a puzzle. She felt like she was standing inside one. The rain didn't stop when night came. It softened instead, thinned into something steady and almost careful, as if the weather itself had decided not to intrude too much. The house settled into that kind of quiet that only happens when everyone else is elsewhere, when rooms stop performing and simply exist. Vivien woke to it first. Not the sound exactly, but the awareness of it. Rain against the window. Darkness pressing gently at the edges of the room. Her mind already awake, already moving, though her body hadn't caught up yet. She lay still for a moment, listening to the house breathe, counting the small familiar sounds, the refrigerator cycling, the tick of cooling pipes, the soft hum of electricity moving through walls. She turned onto her side. The other half of the bed was empty. Cold. Undisturbed. Hoarse. Vivien pushed herself upright, feet touching the floor with practiced quiet. She pulled on a sweater without bothering to check which one it was. The fabric was soft, worn thin at the cuffs. She liked it because it didn't ask anything of her. Down the hall, a light glowed faintly under the bathroom door. She paused there longer than she needed to. Inside, water ran low and steady. Not the rush of a shower. Something gentler. The sound of someone rinsing, lingering, staying longer than necessary, because there was nowhere else they needed to be yet. Vivien knocked once. Light. Polite. The water stopped. A pause followed, brief, but weighted. Vivien could feel it on her skin, the same way she could feel when a conversation was about to turn. Yes. Trisha's voice came through the door. Careful. Vivien rested her hand against the doorframe. Coffee. Another pause. Then softer, please. Vivien stepped back without waiting for more. She moved toward the kitchen, the hallway dim and familiar beneath her feet. Every step felt oddly precise, as if she were walking through a thought she didn't want to disturb. She filled the kettle, set it on the stove, leaned her hip against the counter while it heated. The kitchen looked different at this hour, less like a shared family space, more like a private one. The chairs pushed in. The counters clean. The air faintly scented with soap and something floral Trisha must have used earlier. Vivien reached for the coffee beans, ground them slowly. The sound filled the room, gritty, intimate. She let it take its time. Behind her, footsteps. Trisha appeared in the doorway wearing an oversized t-shirt, hair loose and still damp at the ends. Her face was bare. No effort. No preparation. She looked younger like this, but not fragile. Just unguarded. She leaned against the doorframe, mirroring Vivien's earlier posture without realizing it. Smells good, she said. Vivien didn't turn immediately. She focused on the filter, the measured scoop of grounds. Give it a minute, Vivien replied. It needs time. Trisha smiled faintly. You sound like a philosophy book. Vivien glanced over her shoulder, one eyebrow lifting. Which one? Trisha shrugged, embarrassed. I don't know. One of the serious ones. Vivien turned then, fully. She watched the way Trisha's weight shifted from one foot to the other, how her arms folded loosely over her stomach, not defensive exactly. More like holding herself together. They're not all serious, Vivien said. They just ask uncomfortable questions. Trisha considered that. I don't mind uncomfortable. Vivien noted the phrasing. Stored it away. They stood in silence while the coffee brewed. The sound of dripping water marked time in a way that felt intentional. Trisha moved closer, stopping at the counter opposite Vivien, fingers trailing along the wood as if tracing a map she didn't need. Her gaze moved around the kitchen, landing on details she'd seen before but never really noticed. the stack of books near the window, the postcard taped to the fridge, the faint ring left by an old mug. "You live differently," Trisha said. Vivien poured the coffee carefully. "Do I?" "Yes." Trisha hesitated, then continued. "It feels deliberate." Vivien handed her a mug. Their fingers brushed, not enough to call it anything. Enough to feel it later. "Deliberate doesn't mean controlled," Vivien said. Trisha wrapped both hands around the mug, inhaled deeply. "It feels safer." Vivien watched the steam rise between them. Watched it blur Trisha's face for a moment, soften her edges. "Safe is relative," Vivien replied. Trisha smiled at that, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I guess." They carried their mugs into the living room, settled onto opposite ends of the couch without discussion. The space between them wasn't wide. Not narrow either. It felt intentional, even if neither of them could say why. The rain tapped softly at the windows. Somewhere nearby, a car passed through wet streets, tires hissing. Trisha took a sip, then another. Slower this time. She leaned back, tucking one leg beneath her, the fabric of her t-shirt riding up her thigh without ceremony. Vivien noticed and then told herself not to. Not because it was forbidden. Because it would mean something if she did. Silence settled again. Not empty. Observant. Trisha stared at the far wall, eyes unfocused. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something to start?" Vivien's breath paused for a fraction of a second before continuing. "Yes," she said. "Often." Trisha nodded, relieved by the answer. "Me too." She shifted slightly, closer now, not in a way that could be accused of intention, but enough that Vivien could feel her presence more clearly. Heat through air. Proximity that asked to be noticed. "I used to think it was restlessness," Trisha continued. "Like I just needed more to do. More plans. But..." She stopped, frowned. "It doesn't feel like that anymore." "What does it feel like now?" Vivien asked. Trisha searched for words. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "Like I've been skipping something important," she said quietly. "Like everyone else got instructions I missed." Vivien leaned back, crossing one ankle over the other. She didn't fill the space immediately. She let Trisha hear her own words echo. "You didn't miss them," Vivien said eventually. "You just didn't accept them." Trisha turned, startled. "What do you mean?" Vivien held her gaze. Steady. Calm. "Some people follow instructions because they're afraid of writing their own," Vivien said. "That doesn't make you broken. It makes you aware." Trisha's eyes widened slightly. She swallowed. "I don't feel aware," she said. "I feel slow." Vivien shook her head once. "No, you feel unpracticed." That landed. Trisha laughed softly, but there was something like emotion under it. "You say things like that so easily. Easily doesn't mean without thought," Vivien replied. They sat like that for a while, conversation ebbing and flowing, circling familiar territory without exhausting it. Trisha asked about books. Vivien answered, not lecturing, not showing off, just offering pieces. Trisha listened with a focus that bordered on reverence. At some point, Trisha shifted again, drawing her legs up beneath her, curling inward slightly. The movement brought her closer without closing the gap entirely. Vivien noticed the change in her breathing before Trisha did. Not faster. Just different. As if her body had started listening to something her mind hadn't yet acknowledged. "Can I ask you something?" Trisha said. Vivien nodded. "Why don't you ever interrupt me?" Trisha asked. Vivien blinked. "Do people usually?" Trisha smiled sadly. "All the time." Vivien considered her answer carefully. "Because interruption is usually about fear," she said. "Fear you won't be heard if you don't speak over someone else." Trisha stared at her. "And you're not afraid?" Vivien's mouth curved just slightly. "I listen because I want to know what happens if I do." That sent a visible shiver through Trisha. She shifted again, this time clearly aware of the movement. The room felt smaller now. Or maybe fuller. Hard to tell the difference. Outside, the rain began to taper off. Not stopping, just loosening its grip. Trisha set her mug down on the coffee table, then immediately picked it back up, as if uncertain what to do with her hands. Her fingers traced the rim absent-mindedly. "Tom doesn't ask questions," she said suddenly. Vivien didn't respond right away. "When he does," Trisha added, "it's because he wants something, not because he wants to understand." Vivien nodded slowly. "Understanding takes patience." Trisha let out a breath that sounded like relief. You're patient. Vivien tilted her head. With some things. With me? Trisha asked softer. Vivien met her gaze. She didn't rush the answer. Yes, she said. The word settled between them, heavy and warm. Trisha leaned back against the couch cushion, eyes closing briefly as if she needed a moment to absorb it. When she opened them again, there was something different there, less guarded, less careful. You make it hard to ignore things, Trisha said. Vivien's pulse answered that before her voice did. I'm not trying to, Vivien replied. I know, Trisha said. That's the problem. A quiet laugh escaped Vivien, surprised. Is it? Trisha's lips curved, then flattened again as she grew serious. It is when I start noticing things I don't know what to do with. Vivien leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on her thighs. The movement brought her closer, enough that Trisha's knee brushed against her leg. Neither of them moved away. Noticing isn't a commitment, Vivien said. It's an invitation. To what? Trisha asked. To yourself, Vivien replied. The answer seemed to settle something in Trisha. Her shoulders relaxed. She leaned into the contact just a little more, testing it. Vivien felt it like warmth spreading under her skin. The clock on the wall clicked over to the next hour. Time asserting itself gently. Trisha yawned, covering her mouth with her hand. I didn't sleep much. Vivien straightened. You can take the guest room. Trisha hesitated. Would that be okay? Vivien nodded. Of course. They stood together, moving toward the hallway in quiet synchrony. At the door to the guest room, Trisha paused. Thank you, she said again. But this time, it meant more than the coffee. Vivien rested her hand on the doorframe, close enough that Trisha would have to step past her to enter. Trisha looked up, eyes searching. For listening, Trisha added. Vivien met her gaze. Anytime. The words felt heavier than they should have. Trisha stepped inside the room, turning once more before closing the door. Their eyes held for a second too long. Then the door shut softly. Vivien remained in the hallway, listening to the quiet. To the house settling. To her own breath. Something had shifted, not dramatically. Not visibly. But the feeling remained. Unfinished. Unnamed. And entirely impossible to ignore. The house felt different after midnight. Not quieter, just less guarded. As if the walls had stopped performing their roles and were finally allowed to rest. The rain had thinned into something intermittent, a soft tapping that came and went without warning, leaving behind the smell of damp earth and cold air that seeped through the cracks of the windows. Vivien stood at the kitchen sink longer than necessary, rinsing a mug that was already clean. The water ran warm over her hands, grounding her, keeping her from moving too quickly toward something she had no intention of naming yet. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Not the careless sound of someone walking without thought. This was measured. Hesitant. A body navigating space it didn't fully claim. Vivien turned off the tap. She didn't turn around right away. Trisha appeared in the doorway, barefoot, the oversized t-shirt she'd slept in hanging low on one shoulder. Her hair was loose again, more tousled now, strands escaping their earlier calm. She held her phone in one hand, screen dark, as if she'd picked it up for comfort and then forgotten why. I couldn't sleep, Trisha said quietly. Vivien nodded once. Me neither. The honesty of it lingered between them. Trisha stepped into the kitchen, stopping a careful distance away. She leaned against the counter, mirroring her posture from earlier, though now the gesture carried a different weight. Less curiosity. More awareness. I kept thinking, Trisha said. Vivien waited. About what you said, Trisha continued. About not missing instructions. About not accepting them. Vivien dried her hand slowly, then set the towel aside. She leaned back against the opposite counter, arms loosely crossed, not closed, just contained. And? Vivien asked. Trisha exhaled. It felt accurate. Uncomfortably so. Vivien's mouth curved slightly. Accuracy often is. Trisha smiled at that, but it faded quickly. She looked down at her bare feet, toes curling faintly against the tile. I don't think I've ever been asked what I want, Trisha said. Not really. Vivien felt that settle somewhere deep. She uncrossed her arms without realizing she'd done it. What would you say if you were? Vivien asked. Trisha's laugh was quiet and breathless. I wouldn't know how to answer. That doesn't mean you don't know, Vivien said. It just means no one's waited long enough. Trisha looked up then. Her eyes caught the light differently at night, less guarded, more reflective. Gold threaded through the pale brown, warmer than they'd been earlier. You wait, Trisha said almost to herself. Vivien didn't correct her. Silence settled again, but this time it felt intentional. Chosen. Trisha shifted her weight, fingers brushing the edge of the counter. Her phone slipped from her grip and landed face down on the wood with a soft thud. She didn't pick it up. I'm sorry, she said reflexively. For what? Vivien asked. For being here, Trisha said, then frowned. No, that's not what I mean. Vivien took a step closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to change the air. Then what do you mean? Vivien asked. Trisha hesitated. She pressed her lips together, then released them slowly. I feel like I'm doing something wrong, Trisha said. Even though I don't know what it is yet. Vivien considered that. Does it feel wrong, she asked gently, or unfamiliar? Trisha closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they were damp, not with tears, but with something close. Unfamiliar, she admitted. Vivien nodded. That's usually how it starts. Trisha's shoulders dropped slightly, as if relieved to hear it framed that way. They stood there closer now. Close enough that Vivien could feel the warmth radiating from Trisha's body, the subtle shift of air as she breathed. Close enough that the space between them felt intentional rather than incidental. I don't want to make a mess, Trisha said suddenly. Vivien tilted her head. What kind of things? Trisha replied. Of people. Vivien's gaze softened. Mess isn't always destruction. Trisha looked at her, searching. Then what is it? Sometimes, Vivien said, choosing her words carefully. It's reorganization. That earned a small, surprised smile. Trisha laughed quietly. You really do talk like that. Vivien smiled back. You don't seem to mind. I don't, Trisha said. The admission came easily now. Too easily to take back. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside, tires whispering over wet pavement. The world continued, uninterested in their pause. Trisha shifted again, this time stepping closer without pretense. She stopped just short of touching Vivien, but the intent was unmistakable. Her gaze dropped, not to Vivien's hands, but to her mouth. Then quickly, back to her eyes. Vivien felt it then, a response that had nothing to do with thought. Her pulse moved. Her breath slowed, then steadied. She didn't step back. Vivien, Trisha said, and the way she said it carried more weight than before. Yes, Vivien replied. Trisha's fingers curled into the fabric of her own t-shirt, bunching it slightly at her hip. A grounding gesture. Or a restraint. I don't know what this is, Trisha said. Vivien's voice was quiet. Neither do I. That surprised Trisha. Really? Vivien nodded. Knowing what something is doesn't make it safer. Trisha considered that. Then, with a courage that looked like vulnerability rather than certainty, she closed the remaining distance. Their arms brushed. Skin against fabric. A small contact that sent a clear signal through Vivien's body, sharp, undeniable. Trisha inhaled sharply, as if she hadn't meant to do it. Sorry, she whispered. Vivien shook her head. Don't. The word was soft, but it landed with precision. Trisha's breath hitched. She stayed where she was, close enough now that Vivien could smell her shampoo. Something light, clean, faintly sweet. You're thinking again, Trisha murmured. Vivien's lips curved. Always. Trisha's mouth tilted in response, mirroring the shape unconsciously. The space between them felt charged, as if the air itself had thickened. Vivien lifted her hand slowly, not to touch Trisha, but to rest it on the counter beside her. A deliberate choice. An offering without demand. Trisha noticed. Her gaze followed the movement, then returned to Vivien's face. You're not pushing, Trisha said. Vivien held her gaze. I'm letting you decide. That did it. Trisha's resolve wavered visibly. She swayed slightly, then steadied herself by placing her hand on Vivien's forearm. The contact was tentative, questioning. Her fingers were warm. Vivien felt it everywhere. Trisha's thumb brushed lightly against Vivien's skin, then stilled, as if waiting for a signal. Vivien didn't move away. The moment stretched, taut and breathless. Then Trisha leaned in. It wasn't fast. It wasn't desperate. It was careful, almost reverent. Her forehead brushed Vivien's cheek first, a near miss that felt intentional. A test. Vivien turned her head just enough. Their lips met softly. The contact was brief, almost chaste. A touch that asked rather than claimed. Trisha froze. Vivien didn't deepen it. She stayed still, letting Trisha feel the choice in the pause. After a heartbeat, 2, Trisha exhaled and leaned in again. This time with intention. This time with awareness. The kiss remained gentle, exploratory. A press and release, as if they were learning the shape of each other's presence rather than pursuing sensation. Vivien's hand lifted then, not to pull Trisha closer, but to rest lightly at her waist. A grounding touch. Steady. Trisha made a small sound against Vivien's mouth, more breath than voice. She didn't pull away. She adjusted instead, fitting herself into the moment. The world narrowed to sensation, warmth, breath, the quiet brush of lips moving in cautious agreement. When they finally parted, it wasn't abrupt. It was reluctant, deliberate. Trisha rested her forehead against Vivien's shoulder, eyes closed. Her breath was uneven. "I've never," she started, then stopped. Shook her head. "I've never felt like that." Vivien's hand remained at her waist, still and reassuring. "Like what?" "Like I was choosing," Trisha said, "instead of being chosen." Vivien closed her eyes briefly at that, acknowledging the truth of it without ceremony. They stayed like that for a while, Trisha leaning into her, Vivien anchoring them both. No rush. No next step. Eventually Trisha straightened, though she didn't step away entirely. "This doesn't mean I know what happens next," Trisha said. Vivien nodded. "It doesn't have to." Trisha looked at her, something like relief softening her expression. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not making it easier," Trisha said. "Or harder, just honest." Vivien smiled faintly. Honesty tends to complicate things. Trisha returned the smile, then glanced toward the hallway. "I should probably try to sleep again." Vivien stepped back, giving her space without withdrawing completely. "I'll walk you." They moved together toward the guest room, their steps unhurried. At the door, Trisha paused again, fingers hovering over the handle. She turned, searching Vivien's face. "That didn't feel wrong," Trisha said quietly. Vivien met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "No?" Trisha nodded as if confirming something to herself. She stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. Vivien stood in the hallway long after, listening to the rain begin again, heavier now, insistent. She placed a hand against her own chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. The fracture inside her hadn't closed. It had widened. And this time, she didn't try to step away from it. Morning arrived without permission. The light in the kitchen was thin and gray, filtered through clouds that hadn't decided whether to break or keep holding the sky hostage. The house felt too awake for how little either of them had slept. Even the quiet seemed sharpened, as if it could cut if you leaned on it wrong. Vivien stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't tasted yet. The coffee was there only for warmth. Steam curled up and vanished before it could become anything. She heard Trisha before she saw her, bare feet, careful steps, the faint pause at the threshold like a question asked silently. Trisha came in wearing the same oversized t-shirt from the night before, her hair gathered into a loose knot that didn't quite hold. She looked as though she'd been awake for hours inside her own head. Her eyes were clear, and in that clarity there was a kind of fear. Not panic. Not regret. Recognition. They didn't speak immediately. They moved around each other with a politeness that felt almost theatrical, as if the simplest word might push them into a version of themselves neither was ready to inhabit aloud. Vivien poured coffee into a second mug. Trisha accepted it with both hands, fingers closing around the ceramic the way she had the day before. Heat first. Language later. "Did you sleep?" Vivien asked. Trisha nodded once. Then, after a beat, shook her head. "That's not an answer," Vivien said quietly. Trisha's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Almost." "It is," Trisha murmured. "It's just the honest one." Vivien watched her take a sip. Watched her swallow, like it required focus. The memory of last night returned in fragments, not like a scene, but like sensations that wouldn't align into something neat. The soft, careful press of Trisha's mouth. The pause that had made the kiss feel like a choice rather than a slip. The warmth of her hand on Vivien's forearm. Vivien's body remembered first. Her mind followed reluctantly. Trisha set her mug down and rubbed her thumb along the seam of her phone case, back and forth, a private loop. Vivien felt the impulse to reach for that hand. To still it. She didn't. Tom texted, Trisha said. The words landed and changed the room. Vivien didn't look away. What did he say? Trisha's gaze dipped to the phone. He's coming by later, after the gym. Of course. After the gym. The phrase carried its own blunt punctuation. Trisha added, as if offering an explanation no one had asked for. He wants to make dinner tonight. He said he'd... She stopped, brows knitting. He said he'd try. Try. Vivien felt something cold and precise move through her chest. Not anger. Not jealousy. Something more cutting than either. Do you believe him? Vivien asked. Trisha's fingers stilled. She stared at the phone as if it had betrayed her by being solid. I don't know, Trisha whispered. Then, quieter still, I don't know what I'm supposed to believe anymore. Vivien let that sit. She didn't soothe it too quickly. She didn't rush to reassure. Trisha deserved the truth of her own confusion, even if it hurt. Outside, a car passed on the wet street, tires hissing. The sound faded. Trisha took her mug again, held it close to her mouth without drinking. I keep replaying it, she confessed. Vivien's pulse answered that word, replaying, before she could decide what she wanted it to mean. The kiss, Trisha clarified, as if she needed to label it to keep it from swallowing her. Vivien nodded, slow. And... Trisha's eyes lifted, searching Vivien's face with a rawness that made the air feel fragile. It wasn't like... Trisha stopped. Restarted, softer. It wasn't like anything I know how to talk about. Vivien felt her own mouth go dry. Then don't talk about it yet, Vivien said. Just let it exist. Trisha inhaled, a small shaking breath. That's the problem, it exists. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with the unsaid. What that kiss meant about Tom, about Trisha, about Vivien, about the kind of woman Vivien had always suspected she was, and the kind of woman Trisha was just beginning to recognize. Vivien reached for the dish towel and folded it, then unfolded it, then folded it again. A meaningless motion. A way to keep her hands from reaching. Do you feel guilty? Vivien asked, voice low. Trisha's eyes widened slightly, the question too direct. Yes, she said. And no. And I hate that it's both. Vivien's throat tightened with something like admiration. Trisha wasn't pretending. She wasn't reaching for the comfortable answer. That's not hatred, Vivien said quietly. That's honesty. Trisha stared at her. You make everything sound clean. Vivien's mouth curved, faint and humorless. It's not clean, no? Trisha agreed, and her voice softened. But you don't flinch. Vivien held her gaze. I do. I just don't do it outwardly. Trisha's shoulders dropped a fraction, like relief. Or like surrender. They moved through the morning, the way people move through rooms after something important has happened. Carefully. Repeatedly. Mundane life continuing. Insisting on itself. Trisha helped Vivien empty the dishwasher. Plates clinked softly. Their hands reached for the same utensil drawer twice, then adjusted without speaking. When Trisha passed behind Vivien in the narrow space between counter and table, her breath brushed the back of Vivien's neck. Vivien's fingers tightened around a fork. She didn't turn. The body reacted before language. Always. Later they folded laundry in the living room, a small domestic ritual that should have felt ordinary. Trisha sat cross-legged on the rug, smoothing shirts with an intensity that didn't match the task. Vivien sat on the couch, matching socks, her gaze lifting occasionally to Trisha's hands. Quick, capable, careful. Trisha's phone lay face down beside her. It buzzed once. Then again. Trisha flinched every time it moved. Vivien watched her, and the same phrase returned, uninvited, like a private law. Take your time. Vivien didn't know when she'd started thinking it. It felt like something she'd always believed. But now it sounded like something she was begging for. Time, space. The slow unfolding of something that wasn't supposed to exist. Trisha finally picked up the phone and glanced at the screen. Her face tightened, then softened into a practiced neutrality. Tom? Vivien asked, though she already knew. Trisha nodded. He's asking what I want for dinner. Vivien waited. Trisha stared at the screen for a long moment, thumb hovering. Then she typed, "Anything is fine." The words were small. Defeat dressed as politeness. Vivien felt her own chest respond sharply, as if Trisha had struck her without meaning to. "You don't mean that," Vivien said. Trisha's shoulders lifted in a helpless shrug. "It keeps things easy." Vivien's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Easy isn't the same as good." Trisha looked up, eyes bright with something she didn't let spill. "I know." The afternoon dragged itself forward. The clouds never cleared. The house stayed gray. At some point, Vivien's mother called from upstairs to say she and Vivien's father would be leaving early the next morning for their trip. 2 nights away, maybe 3 if the roads were bad. A friend's cabin. A quiet escape. The kind of plan older people made with cheerful certainty. Trisha murmured polite interest and smiled in all the right places. Vivien watched her do it and felt something strange, an ache that wasn't jealousy exactly. More like grief for how practiced Trisha was at becoming smaller to fit other people's expectations. When the parents' voices faded upstairs again, Trisha exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for minutes. "Sorry," Trisha said automatically. Vivien's gaze sharpened. "Stop apologizing for existing." Trisha blinked, startled, then laughed softly. The sound was more real than her earlier laughter. "I don't know how," she admitted. Vivien leaned against the counter, studying her the way she studied everything that mattered, without cruelty, without sentimentality. Just attention. "Then learn," Vivien said. Trisha's eyes held hers. Something flickered there. Fear, yes, but also the beginning of defiance. The day kept moving. Life intruded gently. A delivery at the door, a neighbor waving through the window. The dull rhythm of chores. Tom didn't appear. His absence was its own presence. Trisha checked her phone, set it down, picked it up again. Each time her thumb found that same seam and rubbed it, the same loop. As evening approached, the sky darkened too early. Clouds piled heavy and low. A soft drizzle started again, more persistent than before, whispering against the windows, as if asking to be let inside. Vivien stood at the sink, cutting lemons for tea she didn't want, watching Trisha sit at the table and stare at her phone like it might change its mind. "Did he confirm?" Vivien asked finally. Trisha's eyes didn't lift. "He said he's running late." Vivien waited for the rest. Trisha's mouth tightened. "He said he met up with the guys." A stillness settled, thick and slow. Vivien felt her own body go very calm. The kind of calm that came before a storm. Not anger. Not fury. A deep, cold clarity. Trisha blinked rapidly, as if trying to keep something from forming. "I had plans," she said, voice small. "I told him I asked him." Vivien dried her hands slowly, the towel rough against her skin. "What did he say?" Vivien asked. Trisha swallowed. "He said I was being dramatic." Her laugh was thin, brittle. "He said it's not like we had tickets to something." Vivien's eyes narrowed. "You were waiting. That counts." Trisha looked up then, and the expression on her face made Vivien's chest tighten painfully. It wasn't just disappointment. It was the familiar, humiliating recognition of being optional. "I don't even know why it matters," Trisha whispered. "I keep telling myself it doesn't. It matters because you matter," Vivien said, and her voice broke slightly on the last word. "Not dramatic. Just real." Trisha stared at her, stunned by the simplicity of it. As if no one had ever said it without expecting something in return. The rain picked up. Not a storm yet, but the beginning of one. Steady, insistent, darkening the windows, sealing the house in its own small world. Trisha's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, then set it down without answering. Vivien moved toward the table, not fast, not urgent. She stopped beside Trisha's chair. "Come here," Vivien said. Trisha shook her head quickly. "I shouldn't." Vivien didn't touch her yet. She didn't force the closeness. She just stood there, present. "You don't have to do anything," Vivien said. "Just take your time." The phrase returned. Different now. Less like a thought. More like an offering. Trisha's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She pressed her lips together as if holding herself in place. "I don't want to be the girl who..." she started, then stopped. "No. Not that. I don't want to be..." She tried again, voice trembling. "I don't want to do something I can't undo." Vivien crouched slightly, bringing her gaze level with Trisha's without invading her space. The movement was careful. Consent made visible through posture. "You can't undo wanting," Vivien said softly. "You can only decide what you do with it." Trisha stared at her, breathing shallow. The room felt suspended in that breath. Upstairs, a door opened and closed. Vivien's mother's voice called something about an early start. A reminder that the world continued regardless of what Trisha was feeling. Trisha nodded automatically toward the sound, then looked back at Vivien as if waking from a trance. "I should go home," Trisha whispered. Vivien's heart tightened. "Do you want to?" Trisha didn't answer immediately. She glanced at the window, at the rain thickening into sheets, at the dark street beyond. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. "I don't want to be alone tonight," Trisha said, voice barely audible. Vivien's gaze held steady. "Then don't." Trisha's eyes widened at the simplicity of it. Vivien stood slowly, offering her hand. Not taking. Offering. Trisha stared at it for a long moment. Her chest rose and fell, as if her body couldn't decide whether to move toward warmth or away from danger. The rain hit the window harder, a sudden loud rush like a door opening somewhere far away. Trisha's fingers lifted, hovered, almost touched Vivien's hand. Then she pulled back, curling her hands into her lap instead, clutching the hem of her shirt like an anchor. "I need to think," Trisha whispered. Vivien nodded. "I know." The room held its breath. The choice sat between them, unmade, heavy, alive. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady as a heartbeat, waiting. Trisha's hand stayed in her lap for a long time. The rain made a steady argument against the windows, louder now, more insistent, as if the house were being asked to admit something it didn't want to name. The kitchen light hummed softly above them. Vivien stood with her hand still offered, not moving, not filling the air with persuasion. The gesture was patient enough to feel like mercy. Trisha stared at that hand as if it were a door. Her phone buzzed again, one quick vibration, then a second, then silence. The screen lit and went dim. She didn't reach for it. She didn't look. "I'm not brave," Trisha whispered. Vivien's face didn't change, but her eyes softened. "You're tired," she said. "There's a difference." Trisha's breath trembled. She shook her head once, small and helpless. "I don't want to be the kind of person who—" "Don't," Vivien said gently. "Don't decide who you are based on what you're afraid you might do." Trisha's throat worked. Her gaze drifted toward the hallway, toward the upstairs rooms where Vivien's parents moved around. Quiet footsteps, a drawer opening, the soft clink of toiletries being packed. Evidence of tomorrow. Evidence of the world continuing. Then Trisha looked back at Vivien, as if returning to the only thing in the room that felt present. "Take your time," Vivien said, and the words landed like a steady hand at the small of Trisha's back. Trisha let out a breath that sounded like a surrender she hadn't planned. Her fingers lifted. Hovered. This time they didn't recoil. They found Vivien's hand and closed around it. The contact was simple. Warm. Real. Vivien didn't tighten her grip. She didn't pull. She just held Trisha's hand the way you held something fragile. Not like it might break, but like it deserved care. Trisha's shoulders shook once. Then again. A silent tremor that held everything she refused to make into tears. "I don't want to go home," Trisha whispered. Vivien nodded as if she'd known that sentence was coming for days. "Then stay." Trisha's eyes searched her face. "And if I regret it?" Vivien's thumb made one slow circle over Trisha's knuckles, barely a movement. "Then we'll sit with that too," she said. "We won't pretend it didn't happen. We won't punish you for wanting something." Trisha inhaled sharply. Her gaze dropped to their joined hands. To the quiet truth of them. Outside, a branch scraped the window in the wind. The sound made Trisha flinch, then laugh softly at herself, embarrassed by her own nerves. Vivien's mouth curved faintly. "You don't have to perform calm for me." Trisha looked up again and something in her expression steadied, still frightened, but less alone. "Okay," she said. The word didn't sound certain. It sounded honest. Upstairs, the suitcase wheels rolled across the floor. A familiar voice called out. "Night, girls." Casual and trusting. The word girls felt strangely small for what was unfolding in the kitchen. "Good night," Vivien called back, voice level. Trisha didn't speak. She just listened, as if committing that normalcy to memory. A world that had no idea what was beginning in the room below it. When the upstairs lights finally went out, The house seemed to exhale. The rain took over completely. Vivien led Trisha into the living room with their hands still linked, not guiding her like a child. Just moving with her, the way you moved with someone who didn't know where to put herself yet. A blanket lay folded over the arm of the sofa. Vivien picked it up, shook it once, then draped it over the back cushion. The movement was mundane, domestic. It made the moment feel less like a cliff and more like a room. Trisha sat first, perching at the edge as if she might still run. Vivien sat beside her but not pressed against her, space enough for air, enough for choice. They listened to the rain. Time didn't advance. It circled. Trisha's phone buzzed again, a stubborn little thing. This time she picked it up, looked, and her face tightened. "Tom?" Vivien asked softly. Trisha nodded. She didn't open the message right away, as if delay could change its meaning. Then she tapped the screen. Her eyes moved as she read. A small frown formed, deepened, then settled into something like resignation. "What did he say?" Vivien asked. Trisha's mouth twisted. "He said he's out for a bit and I should relax." Vivien felt something cold pass through her, sharp and clean. Not hatred, something more precise. A recognition of pattern. Of the way neglect dressed itself as charm. Trisha stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then she typed, "Okay." She stared at that too. Then she erased it. Vivien didn't speak. She let Trisha find her own truth without being steered. Trisha typed again, slower, "I'm going to stay at your sister's." "You forgot." She didn't send it immediately. Her hand trembled faintly. "Do you want to send it?" Vivien asked. Trisha looked up, eyes bright with something she didn't let fall. "I don't want to fight." Vivien nodded. "Then don't have one," she said. "But don't disappear." Trisha's jaw tightened. She hit send. A breath left her like she'd been holding it for months. Silence returned. But it had changed. It was no longer emptiness. It was space. Trisha set the phone down face down as if closing a lid. Then she leaned back into the couch for the first time all night. Her body seemed to remember how to rest. Vivien watched her. Watched the slight looseness at Trisha's mouth, the way her shoulders lowered, the way she blinked slower. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. Trisha existing without bracing. "You're not going to tell me what I should do," Trisha murmured. Vivien's gaze stayed steady. "No," she said. "I'm going to ask what you feel, and then I'm going to listen." Trisha swallowed. "That's worse." Vivien's mouth curved. "Is it?" Trisha huffed a quiet laugh, then grew still again. Her fingers found the hem of her t-shirt and twisted it once, twice, an old habit. Vivien noticed the repetition and felt something tender and aching move through her. "Do you want me to hold you?" Vivien asked, voice low. Trisha's breath caught. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes closed for a moment, then opened again with a clear, frightened honesty. "Yes," she whispered. "But I don't want it to mean something I can't handle." Vivien nodded as if she understood the exact shape of that fear. "Then let it mean one thing," she said. "Let it mean you're not alone tonight." Trisha's eyes filled. She nodded once. Vivien opened her arms slowly, not a grab, not a claim. An invitation. Trisha moved into them like she'd been waiting all day to stop holding herself up. She curled against Vivien's chest, cheek pressed to the sweater fabric. Vivien's arms settled around her with a careful firmness, the kind of hold that didn't demand gratitude. For a long time they didn't move. The rain did all the talking. Trisha's breathing was uneven at first. Then it smoothed, sensing to the steadier rhythm of Vivien's chest. Vivien's hand rested between Trisha's shoulder blades. She traced one slow line down the fabric, then stilled. The motion wasn't sexual. It was grounding. It was permission to exist. Trisha's voice came muffled against Vivien's sweater. "I didn't know it could be like this." Vivien kept her gaze on the dark window, where streetlight reflected faintly in rain-streaked glass. "Like what?" Trisha hesitated. "Quiet," she said. "And intense." Vivien's throat tightened. "Quiet isn't the opposite of intense," she murmured. "It's where intensity hides." Trisha made a soft sound that might have been agreement. Might have been hunger. It was hard to tell the difference in the dark. Vivien felt Trisha's fingers press lightly into her side, holding on. A pause. Then Trisha lifted her head, slowly, as if emerging from water. She looked up at Vivien's face with a directness that startled them both. "Last night," Trisha whispered. "I keep thinking about it." Vivien didn't pretend she didn't know what she meant. "Me, too," she admitted. Trisha's gaze dropped to Vivien's mouth. Vivien's breath slowed, controlled. Her body answered before her mind could offer caution. Vivien didn't lean in. She waited, again. Always again. Waiting as a form of consent. Trisha's fingers rose to Vivien's jaw, barely touching, just a light brush as if testing whether Vivien was real. Vivien turned her face slightly into the touch. Not claiming it. Accepting it. Trisha's breath hitched. She leaned in. The kiss was slower than last time. Not because it was hesitant, but because it was deliberate. Trisha's lips pressed to Vivien's with a soft certainty that felt like decision. Vivien met it gently, letting Trisha set the pace, letting her choose pressure, letting her choose duration. The world narrowed again, breath, warmth, the quiet click of rain against glass. Trisha pulled back an inch, eyes searching. "Is this okay?" she whispered. Vivien's voice was rougher than she intended. "Yes," she said. "Yes." Trisha exhaled, and the relief in it was almost heartbreaking. She kissed Vivien again, deeper now. Not aggressive, not hurried. Just more honest. Vivien's hand slid to the back of Trisha's neck, fingers threading lightly into damp hair. Trisha shivered, the reaction immediate, involuntary. Vivien felt it like a pulse under her own skin. Trisha's mouth softened against hers. Her body settled more fully into Vivien's arms as if it had been waiting for this kind of care all along. A soft sound escaped Trisha, breath and something else, almost a laugh, as if astonished by her own willingness. Vivien's forehead rested briefly against Trisha's. The pause was necessary. A breath taken in the right place. "Take your time," Vivien whispered against her skin. Trisha nodded, eyes closed. The night moved forward without rushing. The couch became too small. The air too heavy. Not because they needed more, but because the closeness had nowhere to go if it stayed in that room. Vivien rose first, hand offered again, the gesture repeating like a quiet refrain. Trisha took it without hesitation this time. They walked upstairs together. No stealth. No drama. The house was asleep. Vivien's bedroom door clicked closed behind them, soft as a secret. The lamp on the nightstand cast a low, warm circle of light. Outside, rain streaked down the glass in thin silver lines. The room smelled faintly of paper and lavender, book pages, and the lotion Trisha used. Their worlds already mixing without permission. They stood near the bed for a long moment, hands linked, breathing close. Trisha looked at Vivien as if trying to understand how she'd arrived here. Vivien lifted a hand and brushed a stray strand of hair from Trisha's face. The touch was light, reverent. Trisha's eyes fluttered closed at the contact, then opened again, darker now. "I'm scared," Trisha whispered. Vivien nodded. "I know, and I want this," Trisha added, voice trembling. "That's what scares me." Vivien's thumb traced once along Trisha's cheekbone. "Wanting isn't a betrayal," she murmured. "Neglect is." Trisha swallowed, as if that sentence reached something tender and bruised inside her. They moved closer. Not like falling. Like stepping. The intimacy that followed wasn't made of spectacle. It was made of attention. Hands that asked before taking, mouths that paused to check for breath, bodies that learned each other with patience instead of conquest. It was heat held in restraint, desire contained in care. At some point, the t-shirt slipped away. At some point, Vivien's sweater joined it on the chair. Their skin met in places that felt both startling and inevitable, and the softness of it was what made it overwhelming. Trisha's body trembled, not from cold, but from the shock of being treated like something worth time. Vivien held her, as if she understood the responsibility of touch. Later, hours later, or maybe only moments, time losing its strict edges, Trisha lay with her head on Vivien's chest, bare skin against bare skin, listening to the steady beat beneath her ear. Vivien's hand moved slowly along Trisha's back, tracing a line, then stopping, then tracing again. A repeated gesture. A promise without words. Trisha's fingers played with Vivien's necklace chain, a small motion that felt like anchoring. "I don't feel empty," Trisha whispered, and her voice sounded surprised by its own truth. Vivien closed her eyes. "Good," she said. "You shouldn't." Rain whispered against the window. The room was warm. Their breathing slowed. The world for a few hours didn't demand explanation. Trisha drifted into sleep first. Vivien stayed awake longer, watching the rise and fall of Trisha's chest, feeling the weight of her trust settle into the sheets. Vivien's mind tried to make a puzzle of it, predict consequence, map fallout, anticipate harm. But her body refused the game. Her body held Trisha and insisted quietly that this was real. Somewhere deep in the night, the front door opened downstairs. Thumble. A muffled laugh. Keys dropped, then found. The sound of a man trying not to be loud and failing. Vivien's eyes opened instantly. Her body went still. Footsteps on the stairs. Uneven. Heavy. The doorknob turned. The bedroom door opened. Light from the hallway spilled in, pale and harsh against the warm lamplight. Tom stood there in the doorway, shirt damp from rain, eyes unfocused from drink and whatever else he'd consumed all night. His gaze moved across the room, slow at first, then stopped abruptly. Vivien didn't move. She didn't cover. She didn't reach for the sheet. Her arm was around Trisha, and Trisha slept, unaware. Mouth parted softly, hair spilled across Vivien's shoulder like a confession. Tom's face changed in a way that didn't look like rage. It looked like understanding arriving too late. His eyes flicked to Trisha's phone on the nightstand, to the unread message notification, to the clothes on the chair, to the intimate disorder of the room. His mouth opened slightly as if to speak. No sound came. He stood there for a long beat, the rain still clinging to him, his body suddenly awkward in its own masculinity. The posture he wore so easily in mirrors looked fragile here, under this light. Then Tom closed the door. Softly. Not slamming. Not accusing. Not collapsing into drama. Just closing. Footsteps retreated down the hall. The house swallowed him. Vivien lay awake, heart steady but heavy, listening to the quiet after the door shut. She didn't wake Trisha. She didn't need to. The moment would exist whether they spoke it or not. Returned, altered now, not comforting, not seductive. Take your time. But time had begun to move in a new direction without them. Morning came again, thinner and colder. Trisha woke with a slow blink, eyes soft. For a moment she looked like she'd forgotten where she was. Then memory returned and her face warmed, a flush spreading up her neck. Vivien watched her with the kind of stillness that didn't ask anything. Trisha's hand moved to Vivien's cheek, just a light touch. A confirmation. You're here, Trisha whispered. Vivien nodded. I'm here. Trisha let out a breath that sounded like relief. Then her eyes shifted, toward the door, toward something unseen. What's wrong? Trisha asked, and the question was quiet but sharp. She was more observant now. She was learning. Vivien hesitated. The rare hesitation. Tom came home, Vivien said finally. Trisha's body stilled. Last night? Vivien nodded. Trisha sat up slightly, sheet gathered around her without panic, more instinct than shame. Her brows drew together. Did he saw, Vivien said. The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. No splash. Just depth. Trisha's face drained, then flushed again, but this time the flush carried something like anger. Anger at herself, at Tom, at the fact that consequences existed at all. Oh my God, Trisha whispered. Vivien's hand found Trisha's wrist, gentle. He didn't say anything. That's worse, Trisha breathed. Vivien didn't argue. She just held the moment steady. Trisha stared at the floor for a long time. Silence stretched. It did not advance the story. It lived inside it. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat with shock. He could have, yelled. Yes, Vivien said. He could have. Trisha looked up, eyes sharp. Why didn't he? Vivien's throat tightened. I don't know, she admitted. And it was true. For the first time, Vivien couldn't solve a puzzle by observation alone. Tom's silence was not predictable. It was human. Trisha's breath shook, then steadied. She looked down at her own hands, as if trying to find herself again. After a long time, she whispered, I don't feel sorry. The confession sounded like a crime. Vivien's eyes softened. You don't have to, she said. Trisha swallowed. I feel sad for him, and angry. And she shook her head. And I feel like I've been awake for the first time in years. Vivien's chest ached with something tender and terrible. She nodded once. That's honest. Trisha turned her face away as if ashamed of honesty, then turned back again, braver now. I can't go back, Trisha said. Vivien felt her own breath catch. Not from surprise. From the weight of that sentence. I know, Vivien whispered. But I'm not leaving him because of you, Trisha added quickly, like she needed to protect the truth from becoming a story people could dismiss. Do you understand? Vivien's gaze held steady. Yes, she said. I understand. Trisha's eyes filled. She pressed a fist to her mouth, then dropped it, angry at herself for needing to be held together. I should have ended it months ago, Trisha whispered. Before any of this. Vivien reached out, fingers brushing Trisha's shoulder, one gentle contact. You ended it when you were ready to see it, she said. Trisha's mouth twisted. And now it's messy. Vivien's voice was low. Yes. They dressed slowly. No frantic scrambling, no shameful rush. The quiet was heavy, but not panicked. Vivien made toast. Trisha ate half of it. They washed mugs. Trisha rubbed the seam of her phone case again, once, twice, then forced herself to stop. The world continued. By afternoon, Trisha went to Tom's apartment. Not to confess the night. Not to plead. Not to perform regret. To end something that had already ended, long before the rain. Vivien did not go with her. That was important. This choice belonged to Trisha alone. When Trisha returned hours later, her face looked different. Paler, steadier, emptied out in a way that suggested something had been cut free. Vivien was in the kitchen, chopping onions for a soup she didn't need, just for the rhythm of it. The knife made a soft, repetitive sound against the board. Trisha leaned against the doorway and watched her for a moment. It's done, Trisha said. Vivien set the knife down carefully. How did he take it? Trisha's laugh was small and hollow. Like I was quitting a gym membership. Vivien's eyebrows lifted slightly. He said, Trisha continued, voice tight. You're losing the best catch in this town, she swallowed. And then he asked if I was going to give his hoodies back. Vivien closed her eyes briefly, not out of pity, but out of the sharp clarity of it. Did he ask why? Trisha shrugged. Not really. Vivien's voice was quiet. Did you tell him? Trisha shook her head immediately. No. Then slower. I didn't even mention you. I told him the truth. That I felt alone for a long time. That I can't keep pretending. She exhaled. He looked bored. Vivien felt anger rise, clean, bright, then settle into something colder. And you. Trisha's gaze met hers. There was sadness there, yes, but also something like peace. I felt finished, Trisha said. Not heartbroken, just finished. Vivien nodded. That's the clearest ending there is. Trisha came into the kitchen then. She moved slowly, as if her body was still learning what it meant to walk without permission from someone else. She took a mug from the cupboard, filled it with hot water, then stopped and stared at it, uncertain. Vivien reached for the tea without asking and placed it beside her. Trisha's eyes softened. Thank you, she murmured. Vivien's voice was low. Take your time. Trisha's mouth curved faintly at the phrase now, less startled by it, more anchored. They existed like that for weeks. Not in a dramatic romance. Not in a perfect new story. In lived time. Trisha moved out of Tom's place and stayed with a friend at first, then found a small apartment with a leaky faucet and too little light. Vivien helped her carry boxes. They made lists. They bought cheap curtains. They ate takeout on the floor because the table hadn't arrived. They went to the grocery store together and argued gently about which pasta sauce was tolerable. They washed dishes in silence. They read on opposite ends of the couch, legs touching under a shared blanket. They learned what it meant to be close, without constantly proving it. Sometimes Trisha would reach for Vivien's hand in public and then pull back at the last second, fear flickering in her eyes. Vivien never mocked her. Never pushed. She would simply rest her own hand on the table between them, palm up, and wait. Trisha would take it when she could. Other days, Trisha would talk. About how she'd never known she craved intelligence like hunger. How words could make her skin wake up, how being listened to felt almost indecent because it was so rare. Vivien would listen until Trisha ran out of language, then keep listening anyway. And some nights, when rain returned and the air tasted metallic, Trisha would grow quiet, eyes distant, guilt surfacing like a bruise. Do you think he knows? Trisha asked once, voice barely audible. Vivien knew who she meant. Tom. Vivien nodded slowly. Yes, she said. I think he does. Trisha's face tightened. Why didn't he say anything? Vivien's gaze drifted to the window, to the streetlight glowing in damp air. She thought of Tom in the doorway, the way his face had looked less betrayed than revealed. I don't think he was angry, Vivien said quietly. I think he was confronted. With what? Trisha whispered. Vivien hesitated, then told the truth she'd been circling for months. With himself, Vivien said. Trisha went still. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. The idea didn't shock her so much as it settled into place, as if some part of her had already suspected. Life continued. Months passed. One afternoon, Vivien ran into Tom at their parents' house. He looked the same at first glance, broad shoulders, practiced posture, confidence worn like cologne. But there was something looser in him now, less performative, as if the mirror had stopped being the only witness he trusted. They stood in the kitchen, alone, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. Tom didn't mention Trisha. He didn't mention the night he saw them. He poured himself water and drank it slowly, eyes fixed on nothing. Vivien watched him. She didn't press. She had learned something too. Not every truth needed to be pried open to be real. Finally, Tom spoke, voice quiet, almost embarrassed. You know, he said, clearing his throat, I didn't think it would feel like that. Vivien's gaze sharpened. Feel like what? Tom's mouth tightened. He stared at the glass in his hand as if it were an answer. Like being replaceable, he said, and the word sounded unfamiliar on his tongue. Vivien didn't soften for him. She didn't indulge cruelty either. Everyone is replaceable if they refuse to show up, she said. Tom flinched, but he nodded as if the sentence relieved him. As if it told the truth he'd been avoiding. A few weeks later, Trisha texted Vivien from her apartment. You'll never guess who Tom brought home. Vivien stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Who? Trisha answered. A man. Vivien's fingers went still over her phone screen. Trisha added, his trainer. The one he talks about all the time. Vivien felt something shift, quietly, cleanly, like a door opening in a room that had been locked for years. She imagined Tom in their parents' living room, introducing a man with the same casual confidence he once used to assume women would wait for him. She imagined the awkwardness, the relief, the audacity of it. The way truth, when finally spoken, could look like indifference from the outside. Everything explained itself without anyone having to say the explanation aloud. Trisha called that night. Her voice sounded lighter than Vivien had heard in months. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, Trisha said. Vivien's mouth curved faintly. Do both, she murmured. Trisha laughed, a real laugh this time. Then she fell quiet. Do you ever feel guilty? Trisha asked softly. Vivien leaned back against her own couch, the familiar weight of the blanket over her legs, the smell of rain drifting in through a cracked window. Vivien thought of Tom's face in the doorway, thought of Trisha's body finally resting, thought of how neglect had been the real betrayal all along. Yes, Vivien said. Sometimes. Trisha's voice was barely a whisper. And do you ever not? Vivien's eyes closed. Her hand found Trisha's old habit in her own body now, thumb rubbing absent-mindedly along the seam of her phone case. No, Vivien admitted. Not when I remember you're alive again. A silence stretched on the line. Not awkward. Dense. Shared. Then Trisha spoke, slow and careful. I don't know what we are, she said. And I don't want to ruin it by naming it too soon. Vivien's voice was quiet. Then don't name it, she said. Just keep choosing it. Trisha exhaled, long and relieved, as if that permission loosened something in her chest. I'm coming over, Trisha said. Is that okay? Vivien's mouth curved. Yes. When Trisha arrived, her hair damp from the rain, she didn't rush into Vivien's arms like a scene from a film. She kicked off her shoes, hung her coat, and walked into the kitchen as if she belonged there, which in some quiet way she did. They made tea. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the counter, the mundane ritual anchoring them in something real. Trisha's sleeve brushed Vivien's forearm. The contact sparked, familiar now, less startling, more like a language their bodies had learned. Trisha looked up, eyes soft. Vivien didn't ask permission with words this time. She asked with stillness, with a pause that made room. Trisha stepped closer on her own. Their mouths met gently, the kiss unhurried, intimate in its restraint. Not a desperate claim, a quiet recognition. When they pulled apart, Trisha rested her forehead against Vivien's and breathed, "Take your time." Vivien laughed softly, surprised by the echo. "I am," she murmured. "I am." And in that moment the story didn't feel like a scandal or a twist. It felt like people finally stepping out of roles they never chose. Like honesty finding its shape in small, ordinary gestures. Like rain washing something clean. Not absolution, not innocence, but clarity. Some loves begin like a storm and settle like a steady, fearless breath. What do you do when the thing you were taught to fear is the first thing that ever made you feel fully seen? Some stories don't end when the moment fades. They stay with us, asking to be felt. If this story awakened something you recognize, you're welcome to share your truth in the comments. And if this journey stayed with you, consider subscribing to Secret Garden Stories and sharing it with someone who might feel seen. Your support helps this space grow, a world with more love, more honesty, and less silence. Thank you for being here.